Now there's a brand new webpage, especially for this podcast. The Politicrat Daily Podcast can now be found on thepoliticrat.com, a brand new page that centralizes all of the places that you can listen to this podcast, the major platforms, and many others at thepoliticrat.com. Lots of content that you can see there right now and every single day. So subscribe now to the Politicrat Daily Podcast and make sure you visit thepoliticrat.com. Thank you. Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Monday, January the 25th, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat, are you someone who is a reality person, or are you an escapist? And when I say reality, I am not talking about reality TV. I am talking about the real world. Or are you someone who finds yourself wanting to constantly escape from the real world? This is not necessarily a personal or even probing inquiry into what you do, but something more encompassing. But it is something that I will be entertaining on this edition of the Politicrat, as well as a couple of other things that we can do to meet the challenges that this year brings us. Coming up next. Welcome back. Before going any further, I want to say this to the people who care, to the sensitive among us all, to those of us who want better. When they tell you that you are too negative, when they tell you that you worry too much, when they tell you that you are too serious, when they tell you that you are not an optimist, laugh in their face or smile to yourself and think or say out loud that it is they who are deluded and actually dangerous. To think that people who express concern about the real world around them, people who express a desire to want to change and improve the world that they live in, to suggest that those individuals who care, who want better, who want a better world for us all, are somehow negative? Well, it really tells you a lot more about the people calling you the negative one than it does about the person who wants to change the world that we currently live in. I do want to actually make this briefly personal for this moment. I could not possibly be doing this podcast, let alone on a daily basis, with some of the subject matter that I approach and speak about, if I were not a hopeful, happy, generally speaking, person. The issues that I deal with here could not be dealt with on a daily basis in the manner in which I deal with them or bring them to the fore if I were someone who was perennially unhappy in general in life. I am unhappy with the state of the world, as are many of you who listen to this podcast. But because you or I, or both, or all of us, may be unhappy with the world and want to see better for it, that does not mean that we are inevitably depressed or unhappy people, with all due respect to those who suffer from clinical depression. I would go on to even say, if I may be so bold, that there would have to be something wrong with you if you thought that this world somehow was doing really well for itself. You wouldn't even pass the test of sanity if you believed that the world that you are presently living in is a happy, shining world. Of course there are people doing good things. Of course there are. There are some amazing people on this planet. And of course, you must find time in your life to do the things that comfort you, to do the things that make you feel happier. People find many ways to do that, and some of those ways are more destructive. The sensitive, the bold, the brave, the people who want to make change in this world, in the tradition of so many, met this exact same resistance decades and centuries ago. People saying to you and people saying to them back in their time that they were too negative, they were too serious, they were always complaining. They were always miserable. That was what was charged. Those are the terms that were levied at them, lobbed at them in their day. And had they listened to the nattering nabobs of negativity who say, stop talking about this, stop being on this so-called crusade, take a break, take a chill. If they did all that, this world would be much, much worse off. We wouldn't have black people on this planet who are free, relatively speaking. We wouldn't have women who could vote. We wouldn't have people of the same gender marrying each other. We wouldn't have laws against discrimination against people who are not able-bodied. That is part of the realm. So the next time somebody tells you that you are being too negative, smile at them, think about it, and maybe you tell them that they are too deluded. We must keep talking about the world we live in. We must keep talking about it. And more than that, we must continue to do something about it, to change the direction of the world, of the country you live in. Change it for the better. Change it for the betterment of all people. You keep doing the work you do, dear listener. You keep educating yourself, dear listener. You keep doing the things that will leave this planet in better hands in future and for future generations. It is the selfish who tell you that you are miserable. It is the selfish and the fearful who tell you to stop talking about this issue or that issue. They are the ones who are the obstacles to progress. They are the ones whom Harriet Tubman had to face down. They are the ones whom Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks had to face down. They are the ones who always stand in the way. Malcolm X once said this: if you are not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. To those who care, revel in your mission to make this world a better place for all. Embrace it. Have a t-shirt with "I want to change the world" printed on it. Why not? One thing you can say, for as long as you may live on this earth, is that you invested in trying to make a difference in this world. That you invested in trying to make this world a better place. And if you're called miserable, if you're called annoying, if you're told to look on the bright side, then you are already doing your job very well indeed. That is a message for those who care. I do want to talk about reality and escapism, and I think the last few minutes have touched upon that to a degree. And I do want to just mention that, this is the real world that we are living in. The real world that says that COVID-19 is still here. That is the real world. Those are the facts. This virus is not going away. There are only going to be degrees of existence of this virus. And we, as human beings, can be our own worst enemy, our own worst enemy. In England now, in the UK, across the UK, I should say, to be more encompassing, the 100,000 people mark. That's 100,000 dead people from coronavirus is here and will be here by the time you listen, perhaps, to this episode. 100,000 people. The highest rates of coronavirus on this earth are in England. In the UK specifically, more generally, I should say. The highest rates of death in the world are in the United Kingdom. The United States now, and it must be over 420,000 people who have died from coronavirus. 420,000. The United States is losing 5,000 people a day. Their lives gone from coronavirus. Los Angeles County is the most severely hit county across these United States. The rates of death are staggering. Vaccine implementation has been terrible across Los Angeles County and around the United States of America. There are stories coming out of Los Angeles, including from someone that I know who cannot get vaccines for their older relatives or parents. So 90-year-olds are not getting vaccines in a number of places across Los Angeles County. And 60 and 70-year-olds are. 65 and overs. How is that possible when right now it's supposed to be healthcare workers who could, of course, be under 65 and people who are in their 90s or 80s? Why is it in Los Angeles County that all of these appointments have already gone for vaccinations, when the public was barely notified about it, say, more than a couple of days ago? Does anybody think, just possibly think, that for the last 2 or 3 weeks, there was a select group of people, maybe the well-connected, maybe their friends, who were alerted to where they could sign up for vaccine appointments? And then the general public at large, by the time they knew about it, they were left holding the bag. And they found out on these websites down in Los Angeles County, run by the health department down there, that somehow all the appointments had been gone. It's like a Prince concert, a Bruce Springsteen concert, sells out in 5 minutes. By the time the tickets are released, they're all gone. It's like insider trading. By the time the public gets word of the initial public offering, it's not very public anymore because it's been private. You may as well call it an initial private offering, because the money market movers, those who move the markets, have already had their cut. They've bought as much as they could buy before the thing even gets to the public. And by the time that thing opens at market, the price of that share of stock has zoomed, because the big money market movers have purchased thousands upon millions of shares. They get first cut, first dibs. The so-called investors, the folk who some of whom may have some kind of inside knowledge about something to do with that stock. And that's what insider trading is. When you have knowledge that is not publicly available about a stock company, a company that is represented in a stock, and that company's earnings have been released privately to you, or something about that company and its initiatives, and you trade on that information that is not publicly available, that is insider trading, and it is serious. It can get you decades behind bars. But unless you were, there's some exceptions to this, but the exceptions are some people actually do go to jail. Ivan Boesky, Michael Milken, junk bonds, and all kinds of other things. We need a more equitable system. And Dr. Marcella Nunez-Smith, who is the chair and leader of the Task Force for Equitable Distribution of COVID-19 Vaccination and Education on Vaccination, is at the forefront now in the Biden administration. And she will hit the ground running on this to change this kind of thing. It's just like when the PPP money, which was supposed to go to mom and pop businesses, ended up going to Shake Shack and the Los Angeles Lakers and all manner of billion-dollar businesses. And hardly any money at all went to the mom and pop business. They were left holding the bag. And once again, we are seeing this surprise, surprise, with COVID-19 vaccinations. This must end. This is what happens when you have a system created by the rich and wealthy, devised by rich white men to take care of rich white men, and by extension, their families. It fits into the American narrative and axiom of, I got mine, you get yours. Instead of, I got mine, I'm going to help you get yours. The American mantra, the U.S. mantra, is, I got mine, you get yours. This very self-centered and self-oriented thing continues to punish us here in the United States. And people continue to die. So I ask you, do you deal in reality, or do you deal in escapism? And by the way, in that question, you only get to choose one answer. You cannot have both. I began this episode of the Politicrat Daily Podcast asking about reality and escapism. Which of the two of those do you invest in more? And really looking at this, there is no doubt that escapism is a central tenet in American culture. It has been for centuries. Typically, the movies is one way to effectuate that escapism, that fantasy visage that we tend to have. That seeking to escape to some fantasy life. And I'm not talking about role-playing in sex or anything like that. That's a different kind of thing. I am talking about our day-to-day existence on the planet called Earth. James Baldwin talked about this, and I think I got his quote wrong, but I paraphrase it. But this is what he said. Someone once said to me that the people in general cannot bear very much reality. He meant by this that they prefer fantasy to a truthful recreation of their experience. Is that true? Do you agree with the assessment of James Baldwin as he paraphrased someone who spoke to him? As he recalled something that someone said to him, do you agree with that? Do you prefer escapism to the reality? Or is it more to the point that the reality is so painful that you have to escape as a kind of therapy, as a kind of self-preservation? And if you are somebody who deals more in escapism, is it because you know inherently and intrinsically that things are really bad in this world that we are living in? Is it because you just want to have some time to take a time out from all of that reality? Is it because that reality is too overwhelming? Perhaps there should be a third option. Activism. Maybe I should have included that. Which do you invest in? Reality, escapism, or activism? And delineated as such, I can say the reality of the world that we're living in which is what you see happening around you and what you know of, coronavirus, and many, many other things. The racism, the institutionalized racism, the systemic whiteness that oppresses, the patriarchy that oppresses, the misogyny that comes out of that patriarchy that has gone on forever. That's the reality. And there are people within that sphere, some of whom are doing good things to try to counteract a lot of this. Then there's the escapism that I've just referenced. And that might be dealt with in many ways. Movies, which is, again, the American culture, Hollywood, the American culture of movies. They provide an escapism, but they also provide a commentary on the real world. And if you look back at the movies from the early 1920s and the 1930s and 40s and even up to now, you must remember this. But particularly in those earlier times, blackface. That was a racist and culturally racist as well statement about what white people viewed and how they viewed black people. And that was put into movie theaters. And white people would go and watch those movies. And any black people who participated in that scene participated because that was the only thing that they had as a choice to participate in that industry. Whether it was the Burt Williamses of the world or the Bill Bojangles Robinsons of the world. Neither of those people I've just mentioned were compensated at all, or very, very little. They did not hit the big time like a Fred Astaire or an Eddie Cantor or an Al Jolson, all white men who made buckets and bucket loads of money doing blackface, that racist, evil thing. Ginger Rogers did it too. Judy Garland did it. Lillian Gish did it. I can go on and on with all your favorite actors. So, is there really an escapism in the movies from that perspective? Is there one for black people in that perspective? When you give and you listen to what I've just said about the movies. Donald Bogle has written books about this. Bogle, great film historian. What is the escapism that you go to? Perhaps it's something alcoholic. Perhaps it's something else. It's some kind of medication, some kind of drug, some kind of behavior. That's as far as I'm going to probe, as far as you are concerned. Because we all do something to try to stay sane in a world like this one. And by denying the reality, hence the first portion of my inquiry, while denying the reality, that is your actual acknowledgement of it. The segment I did earlier, where I was speaking to those of you who really do care and who do want to see changes in this world and a complete change of the system, an overhauling of it, a complete dismantling and then restructuring in the image of preserving and worshiping and respecting humanity. That message is one that is crystal clear. And those who would call you utopian or idealist or too negative, those are the people who are the most afraid. Those are the people who live in denial And those are the people who also know the truth. And they are trying to escape from it when they call you names. But they are trapped. Which is why I asked the question about reality and escapism, and that third one, activism. Because activism, acting, not, hey, I'm Denzel Washington and I'm here to play a character. By the way, he does have a movie coming out soon called The Little Things. But activism as in, I want to and I'm going to make a difference in some small way, or some profound way, or some large way, whatever, to change this world and try to make a difference, to change the reality that we are living in, that I am living in. That's what you say to yourself if you are an activist. And in whatever form that activism takes, of course, it's non-violent. But what I am saying is that that third category is the, okay, so what am I going to do about this category? So maybe it is probably the best thing to call upon 3 different choices. Because isn't it true that the first 2 may not necessarily involve activism? Maybe the first one could, maybe it does, maybe it might. But the last one certainly does. Being active and doing something, whether it is calling your senators, whether it is getting out there, and today, of course, that's going to be very difficult with a pandemic, but getting out there, marching, whatever it is you do, it doesn't have to be marching. And of course, as I said, this pandemic precludes that largely. But getting in touch with people you know, virtually and otherwise, and making sure that you educate people every day for 5 minutes, whatever it might be. And I know that people's circumstances are very different, and some people cannot do this for obvious and very good reasons. But I am saying, if you are able to, please, this year, 2021 is the year that you start to get more politically active. Not just aware, but do something with your awareness, i.e. pass it on to someone else that you know. Please do this. Get involved. Get active. As I've said many times, this nonsense about being woke, that is one of the worst words in the English language, because it means absolutely nothing if you do not act. You can be quote unquote woke all you want, but if you're not doing a damn thing with it, it does not matter. It is 2021. Being woke ain't enough. You have to act. You have to do something with the knowledge that you have, the awareness. And if it means by some chance that you have to say, hey, look, I've had it with this world and I want a better one, and I'm going to try to reach out to people who agree with that, who want that, then that's where you start. If you are a white person listening to me right now, and it means that you are absolutely on board and you know that white people have perpetuated such a racist system, and that there are many white people in the world who are detrimental to progress because of their unstilting, abiding commitment to being racist and to angrily shouting at you when you tell them that their ancestors and people in that ilk enslaved black people, and that they themselves are benefiting from the enslavement of black people hundreds of years later, and they get upset at you, If you're a white person who is telling another white person this, make sure you do tell them, and then make sure you also use the white privilege you have to help a black person or a brown person out. Make sure that you start to hire, HIRE, people to your business, to your workplace, who are black and brown, obviously qualified. We've seen that movie about qualified black and brown folk who are passed over, not even looked at. And then some mediocre white person gets in and does that job and doesn't do it very well. And then some senior experienced black person gets fired for nothing. Activism. It is time to act. It is not enough to put Black Lives Matter in your window and then you don't do anything to back up the belief that Black Lives Matter. It cannot just be a slogan for you to salve your conscience and to relieve you of your white guilt. It has got to be something activated into something that you do, whether it's daily or otherwise. But whenever that opportunity comes and you see something going on and you see it right before your eyes, you know it's wrong. You have to start to act. Speak up. Put that video on your phone. Speak up and use your white privilege to help. Use your white privilege affirmatively. That is the challenge for those of you listening who are white, who really do want to make changes, who really must start doing that and confronting people in your own family. It's a small price, uncomfortable though it may be for some of you. It is a very small price. Black lives matter. So make them matter in your business. Make them matter in your everyday life. You can be friends with a black person, but it's got to go deeper. It's not allyship, it's partnership. We need to use stronger, more resolute language. So let's use that language and build upon it by acting. So I end this segment with 3 choices that you have. Do you live in the real world? Is that what you embrace? Or do you embrace escapism? Or do you embrace activism? And again, you only have one choice from those 3. For conversation, information, and revelation, it's the Politicrat Daily Podcast with me, Omar Moore. Subscribe now and spread the word. Thank you for your support. Welcome back. So, just a few things here in this segment. And one of them is what's been going on. Of course, the first few days of the Biden administration here in the United States have got off to a quick start. There have been confirmation hearings for both the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines. She is now the Director of National Intelligence here in the United States. That is confirmed, and she is in that position, just in case you missed it. Also, in case you missed it, the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, yes, as you might have guessed by what I just said, he too has been confirmed by the United States Senate. He too is part of the Biden administration, and he is now up and running as Defense Secretary, the first black Defense Secretary in the United States history. There will be more hearings this week. Dennis McDonough for the Veterans Affairs, Gina Raimondo, the governor of Rhode Island, for a position in business commerce, I believe it is, Commerce Secretary, if I'm not mistaken. Those confirmation hearings are going to be on, I believe, tomorrow or Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. Before going further, I do want to mention the loss of life of it's a very sad story of the Brazilian football team, Palmas, Palmas. 4 of their players plus their club president were killed in a plane crash over the weekend. A very, very sad loss indeed. They were flying apparently to get tested for COVID-19. My deepest condolences to Palmas and to the families of all of those lost in that horrible crash. Of course, this weekend we also had the loss of both Henry Aaron, king of baseball, I call him, and Larry King, who was the great broadcaster and conversationalist. They were lost on back-to-back days, Friday and Saturday, and both of them were almost the same age. Hank Aaron, 86, just 2 weeks from his 87th birthday, and Larry King, 87. I hope you had a chance to listen to the 2 episodes. One about Larry King's passing, which was the Saturday episode I did, because that literally happened in the morning. And I was actually going to do the Hank Aaron episode on Saturday, and then this news with Larry King came in, and I thought, well, Larry King, I love Hank Aaron, but I really wanted to go with something that was immediate, literally, and I thought that it would be best to go with Larry King first, even though Hank Aaron was the one who passed away prior, the day before. And I felt that doing the Hank Aaron episode second would be more of a reflective, contemplative episode, and one where we could gain a bit more of the audio and some of the other things that come across in the episode I did. And I hope you listened to that episode, which was Sunday's episode of this podcast. Back to a news item here now, and the thing that's going to happen today, and by the time you listen to this podcast episode, it may well already have happened, depending on, of course, when you're listening, is that today, Monday, January 25th, 2020, at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, along with the House Democrats, the House Impeachment Managers, will be walking the sole impeachment charge of incitement of insurrection through the Capitol as they head to the U.S. Senate with that article of impeachment, just as they did 1 year ago. What will happen, though, is that this trial is not going to take place for nearly 2 more weeks afterwards. In fact, it will be 2 more weeks. And I sit here, dear listener, and I honestly wonder this. Why is there going to be a 2-week gap between today's walking over the impeachment article and the trial starting? There is really no reason to have all this extra time to prepare. Why? Why? We can chew gum and walk at the same time. We can chew gum and utilize a wheelchair at the same time. We can chew gum and use crutches at the same time. Why is there a 2-week delay? And again, please do not tell me it's because they need more time to prepare, because that is the reasoning that we are being given. And the Associated Press and others are writing stories that traffic in what I call, and well, Noam Chomsky called it that long before I, manufactured consent, to get you to soften mentally to the condition that, oh, he's not going to be convicted. Well, I'm still going to say that he will be convicted. Now, if I'm wrong, I will gladly say so here. Heck, I say when I'm right. I'm also going to say when I get these things wrong. These stories coming out on this Monday saying, well, there's fears of violence and, senators in the Republican side may be softening against impeachment or toward impeachment, conviction, because, there's rumors of violence. Wait a minute. We have the strongest all we're told, right, is that we have the strongest military on earth, that we're the most secure nation on earth. We've got billions and trillions of dollars being spent on police. There was a $740 billion, with a B, billion dollars military defense bill that was passed just last month. Bipartisan, I might add. You had over 6 months, nearly 7 months ago, if not more, June 1st of 2020, an attack on peaceful protesters in Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. You had tanks, you had this, you had that, and you're afraid now? Oh, well, I don't know. This is being floated in the press, and it's the institutional and the rich who drop these stories, the operatives dropping these stories in the Republican side, dropping these stories into news articles, and then the Associated Press reporters write them. It's not just about the story, it's about what the story is about. And it's not just about that either, it's also about who is writing the story. And I'm not talking about the two people on the byline of this particular story, House sending Trump impeachment to Senate GOP opposes trial, in today's Associated Press. I am talking about who is behind the story, who is telling the reporters to write a story. Because reporters do get assignments. Journalists do get assignments. They get assignments from the news assignment desk. Who is it that is assigning these stories? And for what purpose? This story that I just gave you the title of, is by Mary Claire Jelinek, Jalonick, and Lisa Mascaro, Mascaro, at apnews.com. I'm going to read some of this. As the House prepares to bring the impeachment charge against Donald Trump to Senate for trial, a growing number of Republican senators say they are opposed to the proceeding, dimming the chances that former President will be convicted on the charge that he incited a siege of the U.S. Capitol. But instead, GOP passions appear to have cooled since the insurrection, terrorist attack. That's my word, terrorist attack. 2 words. Now that Trump's presidency is over, Republican senators who will serve as jurors in the trial are rallying to his legal defense as they did during his first impeachment trial last year. Let me just say this to you, dear listener, as I break in here. If this was Barack Obama, who had been accused and charged in the article of impeachment of inciting insurrection, each and every one of those senators, Republican and Democratic, would have voted to convict him yesterday. Heck, they would have voted to convict him on the day of the terrorist attack. And this is what I keep saying to you, dear listener, about this legitimization of white violence, this celebration of it. It's happened throughout all time in America. All the movies, the posters that you look at. Look at the poster of a movie. And I know there's some black folk with guns too, but look at all those white men holding guns, white women holding guns on the movie poster of a movie that you see or don't see. There's always a gun in the poster, don't you notice? It's this legitimization of gun violence. Open carry. It's in the culture of America. Oh, quote, I think the trial is stupid. I think it's counterproductive, says Marco Rubio. He said that, quote, the first chance I get to vote to end this trial, I'll do it. Because he believes it would be bad for the country and further inflame partisan divisions. I break in again here, dear listener. What in the hell is he talking about? What is bad for the country is if you do not convict Donald J. Trump. What is bad for the country is a terrorist attack that ended up with 5 people dead and a 6th person taking his own life. What happens? What is bad for the country, Senator Rubio, is when you have politicians coming down with coronavirus because of that terror attack and because there are Republicans not wearing masks, violating the law of the House of Representatives. What is bad for the country, Senator Rubio, are Republican congresspersons with guns walking into the U.S. Capitol 2.5 weeks after a terrorist attack on it, and people shouting, kill Mike Pence, and people shouting they want to get Nancy Pelosi. And those Republican Congress people bringing guns into the U.S. Capitol and don't want to go through the magnetometer to get searched. They don't want their bags to be checked. They don't want their guns to be touched. That, Senator Rubio, is what is bad for the country. That inflames partisan divisions. When you've got Republicans bringing guns to the U.S. Capitol, politicians, and they don't want to be searched. They refuse to cede to a search. That inflames partisan divisions. And not only that, more than that, it risks the safety of politicians in that building, of people in that building. You bring those risks and you incite them, if you do not do anything about Donald J. Trump, oh, well, I don't know if I can do this. Oh, we can't do more than one thing at once. We need to get on with an agenda. But we can't do this, and so we have to delay it 2 weeks. Oh, please. You cannot have unity without accountability. You cannot have unity without justice. This is foolish to say that the United States Senate cannot walk and chew gum at the same time. It is silly. It's the 21st century. We pride ourselves in this country on talking about the U.S. Senate as the world's greatest deliberative body. But we don't want to put a treasonist and insurrectionist and seditionist and traitor on trial. And we don't want to convict them with the witnesses. Why will we have to have 2 weeks off when you've got video, all the news stories, all the TVs, all the magazines and websites showing you video, throwing it at you like candy. Video all over the place. Video. Ooh, look at this. The way they got into the Capitol and they said Ted Cruz's name and, oh, they're ruffling through his papers. Ooh, oh dear. This fetishizing of violence. You don't need 2 weeks off. The evidence is right in front of your eyes. The video, just bring a website in and show it to everybody. That's your documents. Oh, but they need more time to prepare. All the preparation you need's been in the public domain for nearly 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And you want 2 more weeks. Between tonight, when Speaker Pelosi and the House Impeachment Managers walk this article over, 200 yards down the other end of the Capitol, where these people tried to kill her 2 weeks plus ago. You want 2 more weeks after that to prepare. And this goes for both the Republicans and Democrats. The Democrats don't need any time to prepare for this. They've got the blooming evidence. We all have it. Hey, do you want to see the evidence? Turn on your television. Go to a website somewhere that has news on it, not filth. News. With the footage. I mean, I complained about how much footage. I talked about this last week. All this rebroadcasting of this violence. But you need 2 more weeks to prepare. If this was the Saudi hijackers, how many weeks would you have needed to prepare for what they did 20 years ago? How much time would you have needed? If this were Saddam Hussein, how much time would you have needed? This is a white guy who the system aided and abetted and prodded along and gave $5 billion of free airtime to in 2015 and 16. These media networks and some of the people on them who sit there today as if they had nothing to do with any of this were all there soft peddling all the racism, soft peddling it, never Oh, he talked tough. He said hard words. I can name names. Some of them are sitting on MSNBC, CNN, and heck, you know about Fox. And you just don't want to prosecute the white guy. Do you now? Do you? You don't want to prosecute him. You find every excuse. You know damn well that's the truth. And he has an R next to his name. R for rotten. He has an R in his last name. R for rotten. And you don't want to convict him, do you? He ain't even in power anymore. But if it were Barack Obama, if it were Hillary Clinton, you would have already done it, wouldn't you? You were shouting, lock her up, for the better part of the last 5 years. And now, when someone has committed treason and absolutely architected and fomented a terrorist attack on the country, a terrorist attack on the seat of power, oh, you now want to delay a trial. You don't want to convict. Here's what you and I do, dear listener. Today, when you listen to this episode, what I want you to do is to pick up your telephone and call 202-225-3121. And I want you to flood the DC switchboard of these Republican senators. That's who I want you to call. I want you to call that number. You can also call 202-224-3121. Same number, same switchboard, slightly different phone number, but it's the same switchboard you get through to. 202-225-3121 or 202-224-3121. Again, 202-225-3121 or 202-224-3121. I want you to call that number today. And I want you to call it and ask for a Republican senator that you'd like to speak to. I said this last week, I'm going to say it again. You get to speak to one of them at a time. Do not be rude. I don't think you would be anyway. I don't believe that's the kind of listener who listens to this podcast. Make it very clear, however, in no uncertain terms, that they must vote to convict Donald J. Trump. That's where we come in. We, the people, come in. Believe me, the aides who pick up these phone calls or who listen to them, they relay them to the senator that they are the aide to, the staffer to. Please do this today. Do not wait for this trial to start on February 8th or thereabouts. You have 2 weeks. I want you to call these folks every day. If you've got to call the 50 Republican senators, do it. Please, I'm not kidding you. Call every one of these people. Tell your friends to do so. Send emails to your friends. Send text message to your friends. Send a tweet to your followers. Get them to call 202-225-3121. I'm telling you, this is the time to do it. Call that number. Ask for a Republican senator. You can find their names very easily by going to Senate, senate.gov. And the tab on that page, that homepage that says Senators, click on it. You will find the Republican senators there very, very easily. If you, listen, call all 50 of them. I'm telling you. Call 5 of them today, 5 of them tomorrow, 5 of them the next day, or up that to 10. Or up that to 20 until you get to 50. Do not delay on this. Please tweet them, email them, but above all, call them. Calling them and writing them are the 2 best things. And I really would advise you call them. Flood their switchboards. Put pressure on these folks. Do not wait until the 8th of February. The delay in this trial, in my view, is designed to help slow the passions down, to slow the momentum down. The majority leader, Chuck Schumer, should have had this trial arranged for the beginning of this week, not 2 more weeks from now. But it was because he compromised with the minority leader, Mitch McConnell, who didn't compromise with Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate when Mitch McConnell had the power. There was no compromising when it came to Amy Coney Barrett, the federal court judge, who was rammed through to become a Supreme Court justice. There was no compromise. Did anybody try to tell Mitch McConnell to stop this? Of course they did. But did anybody say to Mitch McConnell, we want to compromise? Did Mitch McConnell compromise with the Democrats on Amy Coney Barrett? Come on now. He did not. He did no such thing. So why is Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, compromising with the guy who's no longer in power? He's not the Senate majority leader anymore. So why on earth is the current Senate majority leader compromising on treason, on sedition trials? I'd like to know the answer to that. Well, here's one answer. Call 202-225-3121. Do it now. Please. Tell Republican senators to vote to convict Donald J. Trump of incitement to insurrection. Do it. Tell your friends to do it. Make those phone calls. Tweet. Do it all. We need a full court press today, now, yesterday. This is going to be up to us. The success or failure of this impeachment trial is going to be down to us. Just like the elections were, just like everything else. We, the people. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.